We're going to go over what happens when a PC that first comes in fails at stage 1 testing. And in this scenario, we're going to look at what happens when we go to test out a memory just to make sure and see if it actually works and if that was the root problem, or no, if it's something that works just fine and something else might have been the problem, and we can actually salvage and harvest that part. So in this case, we have a PC that initially failed stage 1 testing, and we're going to actually open it up right now and pull out its memory, because that's one part that we generally like to harvest if we can and if it works. Once we've harvested the memory, at this point in time we're able to now use our dummy PC. So this is a PC that we know works just fine, and it's used for testing purposes to test out different parts that we put in there that we want to harvest. So all we have to essentially do at this point is quite simple. Again, you can also refer to the dismantling video if you want to see how to pull out and push back in a memory stick or a CPU. But in this case, we're going to skip that because we've already covered that in another video. So all we're going to do is we're just going to, again, take the memory out of that computer that failed stage 1 and put it in our dummy PC here. It's locked and loaded at this point in time. So all we do is we're going to power on our little dummy PC here. So we just put a power cable in, VGA cable is in. We have full access to our mouse and keyboard. It's important that we actually connect the mouse and the keyboard to this dummy PC, simply because what we want to do is, once we've now loaded on the memory onto the dummy PC, we want to be able to go into the BIOS and see that and make sure that this PC is able to detect this memory, which tells us whether the memory actually works or it doesn't. So in this case, a lot of times F12 seems to be the most common way of getting into the BIOS, but there are certain computers that have, F8, F9, F10 from what we have experience that you kind of get into or use in order to get into the BIOS. A lot of times your best indicator is to pay attention to the screen, because the screen will tell you which button to press in order to go into the BIOS. So we're going to look at that as an example. We're going to power up our PC. We're just going to wait for it to boot up, and we can see with this PC, it says F12 quite clearly at the very top right hand corner. So we just do that, we click the F12 button. Now we're into the boot device menu. We have multiple options here. We don't generally care about the onboard or choosing which booting device to use. That is used at a later stage, which we'll talk about. In this case, the only thing that we care about is to go into the system setup, and this shows us every single piece of hardware that this computer was able to detect. When I go down to the system board, which is essentially all the details that have to do with the motherboard and what it is that's attached to the motherboard, we can now actually see here that the memory information comes up, and it tells us that it's a 2 gig DDR3 memory, and it even goes as far as telling us what the speed is, which is 1066. So in this case, we can basically conclude that this memory that we pulled out of a PC that wasn't first starting up and had issues is working just fine. So this is something that we can actually harvest and use and have the rest of the PC dismantled and sat down for recycling to our downstream partners.
At this stage, once we figured out that the memory has passed and we have the specifications of the memory, we can now record this into our ERP software with the following specifications.